Welcome back to the Future Archive. Today, we examine archived broadcasts from July 14, 2026, a day that offered a master class in institutional overreach, aviation near disasters, and the commodification of prehistory. We'll cover a judicial rejection of presidential tax immunity, a mid-air aviation crisis, the auction of a dinosaur that scientists wish had stayed buried, escalating tensions in Yemen, and Europe's largest port wrestling with its carbon footprint. The first story. Federal judge voids Trump's $1.8 billion IRS settlement granting audit immunity. On July 14, 2026, a federal judge in the United States overturned a controversial settlement between former President Donald Trump and the Internal Revenue Service. The agreement, reached earlier that year, would have granted Trump immunity from future IRS tax audits in exchange for a $1.8 billion payment. Critics argued the deal set a dangerous precedent, allowing wealth and political influence to circumvent accountability. The judge ruled the settlement unconstitutional, stating it violated the principle that no individual, regardless of status, should be above legal scrutiny. The decision reignited public debates about tax fairness, presidential power, and the integrity of financial oversight in America. This case revealed a recurring theme of the 2020s, the tension between institutional power and public trust. By 2050, historians note this ruling as a rare moment of judicial pushback against what became known as the Great Subsidization, where economic and legal systems were increasingly bent to accommodate the ultra-wealthy. The settlement's initial approval had been a textbook example of humanity's favorite strategy, postponing problems until they became scandals. The IRS, for its part, later blamed an intern for the oversight. Immunity is a privilege, not a right. The IRS learned this the hard way. The second story. Ryanair passenger describes husband nearly sucked out of plane mid-flight. On a Ryanair flight from Barcelona to London on July 13, 2026, a mid-air cabin failure caused a sudden decompression that nearly pulled a passenger out of the aircraft. The man, seated near an emergency exit, was partially sucked toward the gap before other passengers and crew managed to restrain him. His wife later recounted the harrowing ordeal, stating, "If we die together," a phrase that became a grim meme in the days following. The incident was attributed to a malfunction in the plane's door sealing mechanism, raising questions about budget airline safety standards and maintenance protocols. Ryanair initially downplayed the event, calling it a minor technical issue. This incident underscored the fragility of modern aviation infrastructure, particularly in an era of cost-cutting and deregulation. By 2050, the event is often cited in aviation safety courses as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing profit over maintenance. The near tragedy also highlighted a darker truth. In the 2020s, even life-or-death situations were quickly commodified into viral content. Ryanair's stock price, incidentally, barely blinked. Budget airlines prove that you can, in fact, put a price on safety. The third story. Near complete T. Rex skeleton auctioned for record sum, sparking scientific outrage. A near-complete Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton, dubbed Stan Jr. by paleontologists, went to auction on July 14, 2026 at Christie's in New York. The fossil, one of the most intact T. Rex specimens ever discovered, was expected to fetch over $30 million, potentially making it the most expensive fossil ever sold. Scientists and researchers expressed alarm, arguing that private ownership would restrict access for study and public education. The auction house defended the sale, stating that private collectors often loaned specimens to museums. Critics countered that such practices were inconsistent and that the fossil's scientific value far outweighed its monetary worth. The auction of Stan Jr. was a microcosm of the 2020s tension between commercialization and knowledge. By 2050, the specimen had indeed disappeared into a private collection, its whereabouts unknown, a fate shared by many high-value fossils of the era. The event also foreshadowed the subscription wars, as some museums later began charging premium fees for access to privately owned specimens. One paleontologist quipped that the T. Rex had gone extinct twice, once 66 million years ago and again in 2026. The most feared predator of the Cretaceous met its match, the modern art collector. The fourth story. Houthis retaliate against Saudi Arabia with missile strikes after Sana'a airport attack. On July 14, 2026, Yemen's Houthi rebels launched a series of missile strikes targeting Saudi Arabian infrastructure, including oil facilities and military installations. The attack was a direct response to Saudi-led airstrikes on Sana'a International Airport the previous day, which had killed at least 40 civilians and crippled Yemen's already fragile air travel capabilities. The escalation marked another chapter in the prolonged conflict between the Houthis, backed by Iran, and the Saudi-led coalition. International observers warned that the cycle of retaliation risked destabilizing the entire region, with potential spillover effects into global oil markets. This exchange was a grim reminder that geopolitical conflicts of the 2020s often followed the same script: provocation, retaliation, and a complete lack of long-term strategy. By 2050, historians would note that the Sana'a airport strike and its aftermath were early signs of the resource wars that would dominate the mid-21st century. The incident also highlighted the futility of AI safety committees in geopolitics. No algorithm could mediate a conflict where both sides were convinced of their own righteousness. In war, as in aviation, decompression is always sudden and violent. The fifth story. Europe's largest port faces pressure to adopt greener practices. The port of Rotterdam, Europe's largest, came under increasing scrutiny in July 2026 as environmental groups and regulators demanded faster adoption of sustainable practices. With the EU's carbon emissions targets looming, the port, critical to Europe's trade and economy, was accused of dragging its feet on reducing its environmental impact. Proposals included transitioning to electric cranes, implementing stricter emissions controls for ships, and investing in carbon capture technology. Critics argued that such measures would increase costs and reduce competitiveness, while advocates insisted that the economic and ecological benefits would outweigh the short-term expenses. Rotterdam's dilemma was a snapshot of the 2020s defining paradox: the tension between economic growth and environmental survival. By 2050, the port had become a leader in green logistics, though not without significant disruptions, including a brief period where it was humorously referred to as the Great Spreadsheet Crisis due to the bureaucratic challenges of tracking carbon offsets. The debate also foreshadowed the eventual rise of AI-managed supply chains, which, ironically, were both more efficient and more environmentally damaging in the long run. Green ports, like green energy, were always just one more meeting away. Today's stories from 2026 reveal a world grappling with accountability, safety, and sustainability, often in that order. The past, as these archives show, was a place where humanity's best intentions were perpetually at odds with its shortest-term interests. This has been the Future Archive. The past, as always, is not going anywhere.